Ready? All right. Good morning. Today I'm going to talk to you about The Rear Guard by Secret Sassoon. The first line, he starts off with groping along the tunnel, and it kind of got me thinking of why a tunnel, especially during the early 1900s. And obviously, that time frame is during the World War I. So I was like, why is there a tunnel, and why is he not talking about the battle that's happening outside rather than the tunnel? So I did some research, and a little background of the Western Front of the World War I. The Western Front was pretty much the main theater. It had massive artillery, machine guns, barbed wires in the front of the battlefield. The Western Front was pretty much the border between France and Germany, where it was just like head-on battle between Nazi Germans and the Allied forces, and they're just constantly going at it with artillery and infantry attacks. And due to these battles, the casualties in the Western Front was up to about a million per side. And by 1916, the Germans kind of used a lot of their resources in the Western Front and had to have a way to kind of retreat and have a new defensive plan. And under a new commander named Hindenburg, they started to build a defensive system by the end of 1916, which carried on to 1917. And this defensive line was about 30 miles long from Arras to Soissons, and it contained trenches and bunkers to help prevent the Allied forces to advance through Germany. And so it comes to April 1917. So what really happened in April 1917? And after some research, there was a battle at Arras called Battle of Arras. And it was just a head-on battle with the Allied troops and the Germans. And obviously the Germans were in the defensive system and the Allied forces were charging through. And the Allied forces consisted of the Canadians and the British troops. And it was a 24-hour non-stop artillery by the British troops applying artillery fire, and the Canadian troops advancing through a ridge line that looked up Arras. And eventually this battle lasted for several months, but it helped the French troops to kind of go around and advance through Germany. So this poem was written by this good-looking fellow named Secret Sassoon. A little background of him: he joined the British Army right before World War I. He was commissioned as second lieutenant in the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers. And the Royal Welsh Fusiliers is the oldest British Army battalion in the British Army. He started writing even before he joined the military, and it was a little more of like that romantic type poems. Once Sassoon joined the military and the war started, he was a brave soldier. He single-handedly captured a German trench, and they said by the time all the other troops got there, he was just sitting back and reading a poem. He got a nickname of Mad Jack for suicidal missions of going into night raids and bomb control, and he was just a ruthless leader, but everyone respected him and everyone loved him. They just loved being in the presence with him. Which was really ironic and kind of strange was that Sassoon was anti-war. Even though he was a highly decorated military soldier and officer, he hated the propaganda and the media that happened throughout British, like throughout back home, saying you need to support the war, we need to support the war is just, and there's a reason why we're doing this. He hated the fact that they were doing that, and he tried to counteract those propaganda messages with his poems, like The Rear Guard. They said that his poems, so from the beginning, from before the war, his poems were more of the romantic type poems, and then throughout the war, his writing style and his whole poems changed to show, I guess, the reality of the war. They said he was kind of depressed from the wars because a lot of his good friends died, and he left the military instead of leaving the right way of having his time finished and all. He just decided not to go back after leave, and in a famous letter he wrote, finished with the War Soldier's Declaration, his last few sentences were, "I have seen and endured the sufferings of the troops, and I can no longer be a party to prolong these sufferings for ends which I believe to be evil and unjust." And he kind of shows throughout his poems. And one thing that really reached out with the rear guard was this line right here, when he flashed his beam across a dead man's face, he saw agony dying hard 10 days before into the dead man's eyes. And what really hit me was maybe it wasn't what he saw, but it was more of a reflection through the dead man's eyes of his personal feelings of the agony and the pain, the fear that he's going through in this tunnel and during this war. The rear guard has a lot of vocabulary, I guess, where he uses like roping and like prying torch. He uses a little more detailed words to kind of show the reality of the war. It may not seem like it, but to me, it seems like he was using these certain words to describe his feeling and describe the reality of the war. And lastly, when he writes unloading hell behind him step by step, it was just when he's exiting the tunnel, it was the question that was brought to my mind, or to me, was why was leaving the tunnel such a relief when the war's still ongoing? And maybe it was by the time it was the end of the Battle of Arras, the British troops advanced through Arras and further on. So if it was the time frame when he was coming out, that means the British troops were advancing. So maybe it was the happiness of victory. He realized that his country and his allied forces were winning rather than the Germans pushing them out. Any questions? Thank you.